When my daughter-in-law told me I should leave, I smiled instead of crying. I remember that smile very clearly. It felt stiff on my face, like it did not belong to me. But I smiled anyway, because I did not want anyone to see my heartbreak. I was standing in the kitchen when she said it. The same kitchen where I had once cooked soup for her when she was sick. The same kitchen where I had fed my son when he was a little boy, sitting on the floor with a spoon too big for his mouth. That day, the kitchen felt smaller, quieter, like it was holding its breath. She did not shout. She did not insult me. Her voice was calm, almost polite. That somehow hurt more. She said, "Ma, it would be better if you stayed somewhere else for a while." For a moment, I did not understand what she meant. I thought maybe she was talking about a visit. A few days. A short break. So I nodded and said, "Of course. Whatever you think is best." But inside, something folded in on itself. Something old and tired. That was the day I learned that you can be rejected without being pushed. You can be asked to leave without being told you are unwanted. And it can still hurt just the same. I am a grandmother. I am also a mother. Before that, I was just a woman trying to do her best with what life gave her. I never thought my life would become a story like this. I thought stories like this happened to other people. People on television. People in books. But one day, I realized I was living inside one. And this is my story. I raised my son alone for many years. His father passed away when my boy was still young. I do not talk about that time often. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was quiet and heavy. Every morning, I woke up before the sun. I cooked. I cleaned. I worked small jobs. Sometimes I was tired before the day even began. But when I looked at my son sleeping, I felt strong again. He was a gentle child. Always asking questions. Always holding my hand when we crossed the road, even when he was old enough not to. I used to tell him, "One day, you will have your own family." He would smile and say, "And you will live with us." At the time, it felt like a promise, not a plan, just love spoken out loud. Years passed. My son grew up. He became busy. That is how life goes. Then he met his wife. She was polite when we first met, soft-spoken, careful with her words. I liked her. I really did. At the wedding, I cried happy tears. I prayed that she would love my son the way I could not anymore. In a different way. In a better way. When they asked me to come live with them after my health started slowing me down, I said yes. Not because I wanted to depend on them, but because they insisted. "Ma, you should not live alone," my son said. "We are family." So I packed my things. Not many. Just clothes, some old photos, and a small box of memories I never open in front of others. In the beginning, everything was fine. I tried to stay out of the way. I woke up early. I cleaned my room. I helped in the kitchen when I was asked. I did not interfere. Or at least I tried not to. But living together changes things. Small habits become visible. Silences become louder. Sometimes I felt like a guest who had stayed too long. Other times I felt invisible. At dinner, conversations moved around me instead of through me. I listened more than I spoke. I told myself that was okay. I reminded myself that this was their home, not mine, and why daughter-in-law never said anything unkind directly. That is important to say. She was never cruel. But there were looks, pauses, a sigh when I entered the room. If I asked a question, she answered politely but briefly. If I offered help, she sometimes said, "It's okay, I've got it." Over time, I stopped offering. My son noticed some things, but not everything. And I did not want to be the reason for tension. So I stayed quiet. That is something women like me learn early. Silence keeps peace. Or, at least it pretends to. At night, I lay awake listening to the house breathe. The hum of the refrigerator. The ticking clock in the hallway. I miss my old home. Not because it was comfortable, but because it was mine. Still, I told myself this is family. This is where I belong now. I did not know then that belonging can slowly fade without making a sound. This was before the words were spoken. Before the kitchen moment. before the smile that hurt. This was the calm before everything changed. The changes did not come all at once. They arrived slowly, like dust settling on furniture you use every day. At first, you do not notice it. Then one day, you run your finger across the surface and see how much is gathered. That is how it felt living in my son's home. Little things began to feel heavy. Not big enough to complain about. Not small enough to ignore. I woke up one morning and realized I no longer knew where anything belonged in the kitchen. The cups had moved. The spices were rearranged. The shelf where I kept my tea was now empty. When I asked, my daughter-in-law said softly, "I reorganized. It's easier this way." I nodded. "Of course," I said. But I stopped making tea after that. I did not want to open the wrong cabinet. I did not want to be in the way. At breakfast, they spoke about plans, work, friends, weekends. I listened quietly, my hands folded in my lap. Sometimes my son would look at me and smile. That smile kept me going. But I noticed something else too. When I spoke, conversations paused. Not long, just enough for me to feel it. If I shared a memory, my daughter-in-law would smile politely, then change the subject. If I offered advice, even gently, it floated in the air and fell without landing. I began choosing my words carefully. Then I began choosing silence instead. There were days when I felt like a shadow moving through the house, present but not part of anything. I cleaned when no one was around. I sat in my room longer than before. I waited for permission to use things I once used freely. I told myself I was being respectful, that this was the right way. But respect should not make you feel smaller. One afternoon, I overheard my daughter-in-law on the phone. I was not trying to listen. I was walking past the hallway. She said, "It's just having elders around changes everything. You can't relax." Her voice was low, tired. I stopped walking, not because I was angry, but because my chest felt tight. She was not wrong. Living together does change things. I knew that. But hearing it said out loud made me feel like a burden I had always feared becoming. I walked back to my room quietly and closed the door. That evening, my son asked if I was feeling well. "You seem quiet, Ma," he said. I smiled. "Ivy fine," he replied. That word again. Fine. It became my shield. My answer to everything. As weeks passed, small rules appeared. Unspoken ones. Breakfast should be quick. The television volume should be low. Visitors should be informed ahead of time. None of these were unreasonable, but none of them felt like they included me. I began asking before doing anything. Is it okay if I make this? Is it okay if I sit here? Is it okay if I go out this evening? Each question took something out of me. A little confidence. A little dignity. I noticed my daughter-in-law watching me sometimes. Not with anger, with calculation, as if she was measuring space, time, patience. I wondered what she saw when she looked at me. An old woman? An extra responsibility? A reminder of a life she did not choose? I wished she could see what I carried inside. The years, the sacrifices, the love that still had nowhere else to go. But I did not say any of this. I did not want to be dramatic. I did not want to make her uncomfortable. So I swallowed it all. One day, there was a small incident. Small, but it stayed with me. I had cooked lentils the way my son liked them when he was young. Slow. With care. When my daughter-in-law came home, she tasted it and said, "Oh, I usually make it differently." She did not mean harm. I know that. But I said, "I'm sorry. I won't make it again." She looked surprised. I didn't mean. "It's okay," I said quickly. But after that, I stopped cooking. The kitchen was no longer a place of comfort. It became a place where mistakes lived. My son started noticing changes then. He asked why I stayed in my room so much. Why I barely ate. I told him I was just tired. He looked concerned. But life pulled him away again. Work. Responsibilities. And I did not want to pull him back with my feelings. Sometimes, late at night, I opened my small box of memories. Old photos. Letters. I touched them gently, like they were fragile. I wondered if this was how old age felt. Not pain, not sickness, just slowly becoming unnecessary. There were moments when my daughter-in-law and I sat together in silence. Not angry silence, just empty. I wanted to say something kind, something honest. But every time I opened my mouth, I feared it would come out wrong, that I would sound needy or demanding. So I stayed quiet, and quiet things grow heavy over time. The house felt different then. Not hostile, but tense. Like everyone was careful not to touch something fragile that might break. I began sleeping earlier, waking up later. I tried to take up less space, less sound, less air. I thought if I became small enough, everything would be fine. I was wrong. This was the stage before the fall. Before the words that changed everything. The distance was already there. We were just pretending it wasn't. The day everything changed did not feel special at first. There was no warning. No heavy feeling in the air when I woke up. It was an ordinary day. That is what makes it stay with me. I remember the light that morning. Soft. Pale. It came through the window and rested on the floor like it had nowhere else to go. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time before standing up. My body felt slower than usual. My heart too. My son had already left for work. The house was quiet except for the sound of dishes in the kitchen. I waited. Then I walked out slowly. My daughter-in-law was standing at the counter. Her back was to me. She looked tired. I said, "Good morning." She turned and nodded. "Morning," she replied. There was a pause. Not uncomfortable, just empty. Then she said, "Ma, can we talk for a minute?" I said yes. Of course I did. We sat at the dining table. The same table where I had eaten quietly so many nights. The same table where I had watched my son grow into a man. She folded her hands together, unfolded them, then folded them again. I could see she was choosing her words. That scared me more than anger would have. She said, "I've been thinking a lot lately." I nodded. She continued, "I don't think this living arrangement is working well for everyone." Her voice was calm, careful, almost gentle. I felt my chest tighten, but I stayed still. She said, "You deserve comfort. And we need our space too." I waited for her to finish. Then she said the sentence that still echoes in my ears. "Maybe it would be better if you stayed somewhere else for a while." For a moment, everything inside me went quiet. Not loud, not painful, just empty. I looked at her face. She was not angry. She looked relieved, like someone who had finally said something they had been holding in for too long. I understood then that this conversation had happened many times in her head before it ever reached me. I smiled. I do not know why. Maybe because I did not want her to feel bad. Maybe because I did not want to beg. Maybe because smiling was easier than breaking. I said, "Of course. I understand." She looked surprised, relieved even. "More." "I hope you don't take this the wrong way," she said. "I don't," I replied. But I did. She explained practical things. Logistics. Time frames. Her words moved around me, not through me. Inside, I was somewhere else. Somewhere quiet and cold. I thought of my son as a little boy sleeping on my arm. I thought of promises spoken without knowing how heavy they would become. I did not interrupt her. When she finished, she stood up and said, "Thank you for understanding." Then she went back to the kitchen. I stayed at the table long after she left. My hands were resting on the wood. I could feel the grain beneath my fingers. That table had heard everything. Laughter, arguments, silence. Now it heard my heart breaking quietly. Later that evening, my son came home. He greeted me the same way he always did. "Ma, how was your day?" I looked at him. Really looked. He looked tired, stressed. I did not want to add to that. But I could not keep it inside anymore. So I said, "Your wife and I talked today." He froze slightly, then said, "About what?" I told him, not dramatically, not emotionally, just facts. He was silent for a long time. Then he said she didn't mean it like that. I nodded. I know, I said. He said, you know you can stay. I smiled again. That smile. I don't want to be where I'm not needed, I said softly. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. That hurt more than any words. That night, I packed my things. Slowly, carefully. Each item felt heavier than it should have. My clothes, my shawl, my old photos. I stopped when I reached the small box of memories. I sat on the bed and held it for a long time. I wondered when my life had become something that could be packed into a suitcase. The next morning, my son offered to help me find a place. He spoke about options, distances. I listened, but inside, I was already leaving. When the door closed behind me later that day, it was not loud, just a soft click. That sound followed me, not because it was dramatic, but because it felt final. I did not cry. I walked down the steps slowly and kept my head up. I told myself I was strong. But strength does not mean you are not hurt. I stayed with a distant relative at first. A small room. Clean. Quiet. At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The silence there was different. Not tense. Just lonely. Days passed. Then weeks. My son called often. He asked if I was okay. I said yes. Always yes. My daughter-in-law did not call. I told myself not to hold that against her. Everyone has their limits. But something inside me had shifted. I no longer felt like a mother living with her family. I felt like an old woman who had overstayed her welcome. That thought settled deep. One evening, I took out my photos again. I looked at my younger face. I barely recognized myself. I wondered when I had started shrinking myself for others. When I had stopped believing I deserved space. That was the true turning point. Not the conversation, not the packing, but the realization. That love, when not balanced with respect, can quietly disappear. The first few weeks after I left were the hardest. Not because anything bad happened, but because nothing happened at all. No one needed me. No one asked where things were kept. No one waited for me at the table. The days were quiet in a way I had never known before. I woke up early out of habit. There was no rush, no schedule. I sat by the window of the small room I was staying in and watched the world move without me. People passed by. Cars came and went. Life continued. And I was still. At first, I blamed myself. I went over every moment in my head. Maybe I talked too much. Maybe I talked too little. Maybe I should have tried harder. Maybe I should have left sooner. Regret is like that. It does not come all at once. It arrives quietly and stays longer than invited. My son visited on weekends. He brought fruit. Sometimes sweets. He asked if I was eating well. If I was warm enough. I nodded. I smiled. We talked about small things. Safe things. Neither of us mentioned the house. Or how empty my chair must have looked at the dining table. Before leaving, he always said, "Ma, call me if you need anything." I always said, "I will." But I never did. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the window, something inside me finally loosened. I was sitting alone, holding a cup of tea, when I felt tears come. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just slow tears that surprised me. I did not wipe them away. I let them fall. For the first time, I admitted the truth to myself. I was hurt. I felt rejected. And I felt tired of pretending I was fine. That moment did not break me. It healed me. It healed me. The next morning, I went for a walk. Slowly. The air smelled fresh after the rain. I noticed small things I had forgotten to see. Birds on wires. A child laughing somewhere nearby. The warmth of the sun on my face. I realized something then. I was still alive. Still here. My life had not ended because one chapter closed. Over time, I found a small routine. I helped at a nearby community kitchen a few days a week. Nothing heavy. Just chopping vegetables. Serving food. No one there knew my story. And that felt freeing. They saw me as I was in that moment. Not as a problem. Not as someone in the way. Just a woman helping. One afternoon, A young woman thanked me for listening to her. She said, "You remind me of my grandmother." I smiled. That word still carried weight, but it did not hurt the same way anymore. I realized then that love does not always need a family title to exist. Months passed. My son and his wife visited together one day. I could tell it was difficult for her. She looked nervous. We sat together. There was tea between us. And silence. Then she said,
Ma,
"I hope you know I never wanted to hurt you." I looked at her. I believed her. "I know," I said. She continued, "I didn't handle things well." I nodded. Neither of us cried. Neither of us argued. Sometimes understanding does not come with apologies spoken out loud. It comes with honesty. After that, things changed slowly. Not magically. Not perfectly. But honestly. I did not move back. And I did not want to. I visited occasionally. Stayed for lunch. Left before evening. That balance worked for all of us. I learned something important during that time. Love does not mean sharing the same roof. It means respecting each other's space. And sometimes, loving someone means letting go of the role you thought you would play forever. I stopped seeing myself as someone who had been pushed aside. Instead, I saw myself as someone who had survived many seasons. This was just another one. I began writing letters to myself. Not to send to anyone. Just small notes. "You did your best. You are allowed to rest. You are still worthy." I kept them in the same small box where I once stored memories of the past. Now it held reminders of the present. One evening, my son called me. He said, "Ma, thank you." "For what?" I asked. "For always being patient, even when it was hard." I closed my eyes. "I was learning too," I said. And that was true. I no longer carry anger. Anger is heavy. I carry understanding. My daughter-in-law was not a villain. She was a woman trying to protect her own space. I was not weak. I was a woman who loved deeply and learned to love herself too. Now, when I sit alone, it does not feel empty. It feels peaceful. I drink my tea slowly. I watch the light move across the floor. I remember who I was. And I respect who I have become. If there is one thing I have learned, it is this. You can give your whole life to others and still deserve a life of your own. You can be kind without disappearing. You can be alone without being unloved. So if you are listening to this and feeling pushed aside, or forgotten, or quietly hurting, please remember this. Your value does not decrease because someone else needed space. Your story does not end because a door closed. Sometimes, it simply turns toward a softer light. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you to be gentle with yourself and with others, because we are all learning how to belong.